Our story begins with a boy named Charlie, who's been wondering about clouds his entire life. Like, he's obsessed with clouds. Every time they float by, he runs outside, looks up and asks his mom, "Mom, where do clouds come from?" But every time she just says, "Don't ask me, ask your dad." And then he'd look over his dad, who would be staring off into space with a dazed expression on his face, like a total deadbeat dad. So one day, while exploring his attic, he finds an old steamer trunk with a mysterious keyhole on it. Curiosity got the best of him, and after searching high and low for a key, he finally found one that fit. The trunk opened up to reveal a spiral staircase that led up through a trapdoor in the ceiling and straight into the clouds. That's right, straight into the clouds. As Charlie floated higher and higher above the ground, the air grew cooler, and before long, he was met with a sight that took his breath away. Way up here, the sky wasn't blue anymore. It was filled with swirling mists and billowing vapors. And in the distance, he could see a massive floating island made entirely of clouds. He had no idea how or why it was floating, but it sure looked cool. And as he got closer, he noticed something even more astonishing. The island was covered with all sorts of whimsical structures, including what looked like a giant bathtub, some enormous mixing bowls, and several questionable-looking machines. It almost looked like Santa's workshop up here, except instead of toys, they were making clouds. "What the fluff?" Charlie exclaimed as he landed on the island, and a nearby cloud maker jumped in surprise. These cloud makers were a quirky bunch. They wore goggles and aprons, and some of them even had little antennae hats. They all seemed very focused on their craft, though carefully molding and shaping clouds into all sorts of wacky shapes. There were fluffy bunny rabbits, gigantic dragons, and even a few suspicious-looking blobs that Charlie hoped weren't sentient. One of the cloud makers, a portly fellow with a handlebar mustache, finally noticed Charlie standing there gawking at them. "Well, hello there," he boomed up. "Welcome to the Cloud Factory. You must be Charlie." Charlie jumped in surprise. "How did you know my name?" he asked. The portly cloud maker chuckled. "I know everything that goes on down there, my boy," he said with a wink. "After all, we cloud makers are the ones who bring rain to the crops, snow to the children, and rainbows to the hopeful romantics. We are vital to the balance of nature, you know." Charlie nodded seriously, although he was still a little freaked out about how this guy knew his name. As the portly cloud maker continued talking, Charlie noticed a huge sign on the wall that read, "No dips or dabs allowed." He had no idea what those meant, but he didn't want to find out. The portly cloud maker cleared his throat. "So Charlie, I presume you've come to learn the ancient art of cloud making." Charlie's eyes widened. "Really? You think I can make clouds, too?" The portly cloud maker raised an eyebrow. "Well, I suppose we could use another apprentice. Although I must warn you, it's not all fun and games around here. Being a cloud maker is a serious business." Charlie beamed at him. "I understand," he said earnestly. "I'm a very responsible person." The portly cloud maker wasn't convinced, but he agreed to give Charlie a try. "All right, let's get started." First, he showed Charlie how to gather raw materials, which turned out to be surprisingly difficult. Apparently, the best clouds are made from a special substance called condens, which can only be harvested from the tops of mountains at dawn. Thankfully, one of the other cloud makers volunteered to go get some, while Charlie watched intently. The portly cloud maker then explained the most important rule of cloud making. "Never add anything to the condens," he said gravely. "It'll ruin the purity of the cloud and could have disastrous consequences." Charlie nodded solemnly, although he couldn't help but wonder what exactly would happen if you added something to the clouds. Like, would it explode? Would it create a giant turd in the sky? Was that even possible? As soon as the other cloud maker returned with the condens, the portly fellow began the lesson proper. "All right, Charlie, it's your turn," he said, handing him a giant pair of fluffy dice. "Now, remember everything I've told you. Don't add anything to the condens, okay?" Charlie took a deep breath and prepared to make his first ever cloud. But as soon as he started rolling the dice, he panicked. What if the cloud came out looking weird? What if it fell apart? What if it brought a hurricane to the local town? His hands trembled as he tried to focus, but it was no use. The cloud he created was a misshapen, asymmetrical blob that looked like it had a serious case of gas. The portly cloud maker sighed and shook his head. "Don't worry, Charlie. he said kindly. Everyone starts out that way. You just need a little practice. So he showed Charlie how to fix his cloud, and soon enough, it was looking much better. It was still a bit lumpy, but hey, it wasn't actively trying to kill people. Encouraged by this small victory, Charlie tried again, this time creating a cloud that looked like a big white feather. The portly cloudmaker nodded approvingly. That's the spirit, he said. Just remember, clouds are like puffies. Everyone's different. After a few more tries, Charlie felt confident enough to make something a little more ambitious. A cloud shaped like a dragon. He carefully molded the condens, adding a little extra fluff here, a little less fluff there, until he had created a majestic beast that looked like it belonged in a Renaissance painting. Well, maybe not that one. The portly cloudmaker was impressed. Very good, Charlie, he said. You've learned the basics of cloud making. Now it's time for the advanced stuff. He handed Charlie a vial filled with a strange glowing liquid. This is a dip, he said. It's used to add color to your clouds. Just remember, dips are for decoration only. If you add anything else to the clouds, it could be dangerous. Charlie nodded eagerly and prepared to make his masterpiece. He dipped his fluffy dice into the vial and rolled them across the condens, creating a beautiful rainbow-colored cloud that looked like it was straight out of a kid's book. The portly cloudmaker beamed at him. Excellent work, Charlie said. But now it's time for the final test. The dabs. Charlie gulped as he took the vial of dabs. Okay, he said nervously. The dabs were a mysterious substance that could either enhance or completely ruin a cloud. Most cloudmakers never dab at all, but if you did, you could add all sorts of crazy effects to your clouds. The portly cloudmaker had warned him about this earlier, but Charlie had ignored him. Now he wished he hadn't. As soon as he touched the cloud with the vial, it began to change. At first, it was just a little zap here, a bloop there, but then suddenly it shot up into the air and transformed into a giant dark cloud. Not just any cloud, mind you, but a cumulonimbus cloud, the kind that brings thunderstorms and tornadoes and all sorts of bad weather. In fact, the longer Charlie looked at it, the more he realized it was doing something else. It was actually sucking up water from the ocean below and forming a giant vortex that threatened to pull everything into its swirling depths. The other cloudmakers gasped in horror as they realized what was happening. Quick! Charlie! You have to fix it! The portly cloudmaker yelled. Use your knowledge of clouds to stop it before it's too late. Thinking fast, Charlie grabbed another vial of condens and began dabbing it onto the edges of the cloud, trying to stabilize it as best he could. At first, it didn't seem to be working. The cloud continued to grow, and soon it was so big it blotted out the sun, plunging the world below into darkness. But slowly, very, very slowly, the growth began to slow down. The clouds stopped sucking up water, and the vortex began to dissipate. As the light returned to the sky, the other cloudmakers stared at Charlie in awe. You saved us all! The portly cloudmaker boomed. You may be young, Charlie, but you have the makings of a great cloudmaker. Just remember, with great power comes great responsibility. Charlie blushed as he looked at the smaller cloud he had created to cover up the big one. He was embarrassed that he had caused such a big problem, but he was also really proud of himself for fixing it. And as if to reward him for his quick thinking, the sky turned a beautiful shade of orange as the sun began to set. From that day forward, Charlie became a full-fledged member of the Cloudmakers Union, spending his days creating all sorts of amazing things and learning all sorts of valuable lessons about clouds, dips, dabs, and the importance of teamwork. The end.